I was on the Mayflower. I was 18 years old. The Mayflower that came across with the Puritans and the Separatists, and my father and my stepmother and my brother were all on the Mayflower. And we left from Southampton, England, when the Speedwell arrived. You see, the Speedwell also was accompanying us, and the two ships, the Speedwell and the Mayflower, were going to the New World. We were having persecution. Many of them were separatists, and they had separated from the king and his rulings, but being persecuted. And we were Puritans. We were still under the king's rule, but we wanted our own freedom to be able to worship as we wanted to and as we felt, and not being persecuted. And there were other passengers along with us in the Mayflower as well, and the crew. We left. We wanted to go about in July and get to the Jamestown colony, and we left. It wasn't very long that the Speedwell was leaking, so we all had to turn around. The Mayflower turned around and the Speedwell, and 70 people upon the Speedwell was too much for the Mayflower. So we left, having 20 of the people from the Speedwell up on the Mayflower. That's 102 people, and this Mayflower was 100 feet long. It was very crowded. Fortunately, it was good weather, but still, with all the delay that happened, we did not leave until late August and early September. We were hoping, as I said, to land in the colonies somewhere around Jamestown, and we would be called Plymouth people. Well, it was late in the fall, and 2 weeks were beautiful, and then the storm hit hard. Now, you see, my name being Priscilla Millens, I was told that I was the romance upon the ship. You know, John Alden was on the ship as well, and we met on the ship, and later we married and had 11 children and many descendants here today. However, at the time, we were just meeting in the ship, and it was rocking and rolling, and the stench, and it was a time of really bonding with one another in prayer. However, it was very hard to endure the stench. And as the time went by, we were halfway into the voyage when the mast above us cracked. We prevailed upon Providence what to do. The ship would flounder and not even sail if it broke into. Someone remembered there was a screw that had been put on board, a big metal screw clamp that would help hoist the lumber when we were making our homes, our log cabins. Well, so they put the screw underneath and put some boards on top of it, and around and around, and it went up, and it tightened, and it was secure. We were grateful to Providence once again, and the ship began to sail more, and the storms were just as harsh and just as hard. And one of our indentured servants, well, he was only in his teens, John, he couldn't stand it any longer, John Hallen, and he just went up and lifted the doorway of the ship's floor. We were under the ship's floor, you know. We were only 4 feet to 5 feet tall in our stature, and there was only a few inches, maybe 8 inches or so above our heads, and so it was just too much for him. And he went over and he lifted the door and threw it out, and when he flung himself out, the sea just washed him across the ship, but a rope was dangling, and he caught the rope. The rope was just around somewhere, and he just found it upon his hand. And the other men that had peeked out of the ship just a little bit to see what was happening, to see that he was going to be swept over and surely die, well, they began to pull him back, and he was pulled back to safety. It was a mighty, marvelous day for this event to happen. And John Hallen was never the same, knowing that he was facing death at that very minute. Well, he became a man of stature and a deacon in our Puritan village later on. Well, as I said, the ship began to rock and reel. It was a stormy time, but 66 days later, we did land in a cove, Cape Cod they call it. And when we landed on one side of this horseshoe like peninsula, and we landed, and when a few of the men got out to explore, well, they heard and saw eyes watching them, and wasn't long before there were arrows coming their way, and they quickly boarded back upon our cold ship, and we went back across another side of the peninsula, and yes, there was a rock there. I hear they call it Plymouth Rock today, and we were the Plymouth people, but we landed and looked for a place that was barren with no inhabitants. And so when the men got out to explore, well, they found empty huts and empty homes and bones. It had looked like there had been a disease or sickness that had gone through. There was no inhabitants whatsoever. It was a grueling December and January and in March, snow and ice, and we did what we could to survive, and half of us died at this time, not across the Atlantic, but after we got there, half of the people died. But there was a man that came along, and his name was Samoset. He could not speak very well English, but he knew some English. He knew enough to ask for a beer when he saw us, and he was a friendly Native American, and we made friends with him, but he was not able to really help us. He knew someone else that was able to help us. His name was Squanto, and it so happens that Squanto had been kidnapped like 13 years earlier. He had been taken across to England, and he had learned all the English ways and the language and all about us and our ways. And so he obtained the friendship of Squanto. When Squanto came back, he came back to the Jamestown, Providence area and the colony area. He went to look for his people, of course, and his people were those that had been the bones that we found on the ground. If he had not been kidnapped, he would have died himself. Well, he was there. He was a God-sent Savior to us, as we praised our Savior for sending him. And he taught us how to put corn in a fish head, and then the birds wouldn't eat it, and how to harvest, and how to live in this desolate, cold land for this time. And the spring came, and like I mentioned, there was about half of our people have died, but the harvest did come. William Bradford became our mayor, and well, it was sad about his wife. Just as they had landed at the Cape Cod Cove back a few months ago, was she had fallen off the boat, and that was our first death. But now the spring has come, and the harvest is full, and the friends we are making with the Native Americans that are there. Well, we made friends, and there was a dinner. Of course, there was only 9 of us girls. 4 were married women, and I was one of the girls, and my parents had died, my brother died. All of us had lost our family. But 9 of us prepared the deer and the eel and the hasty pudding and plum pudding and so forth. And they had a wonderful celebration for 3 days. We had games, and there was a great celebration. We were giving thanks to Providence that we did settle. And this did come to pass, that we became a settlement in that area. As I mentioned, John and I had met, and then we were married, and we had 11 children and 100 acres of land, and he was most happy that we had made it, and we were actually enjoying this new land that had been so dangerously cold the time that we landed. And that's the story of our story of the Mayflower and Thanksgiving. And I hope that you too will see the providence that helped us to survive, and how we are giving thanks today for the many good things that we do have. Thank you for sharing my story with me.